Redditors who were poor as kids, what things were normal to you when you were poor growing up? I grew up in Serbia in the 90s, very poor when hyperinflation hit. Eating a bread and sugar sandwich. Only being able to afford milk for my little brother, 1 glass per day. My dad giving me enough money so I could go to the store to buy a single banana. Bread loaf literally costing 2 cents. Wearing the same clothes for a week straight. Taking a shower once a week and having to boil your water in a large pot. Sharing a school bag with my sister. Our house had nylon and duct tape where some windows were supposed to be. This especially sucked during storms. Planting and harvesting our own vegetables. Sealing some house cracks with mud. Walking everywhere and asking for rides because we didn't own a car. Firewood and only one room of the house having heat. Coca-Cola was a luxury. If I saw someone drinking Coke, I thought they were rich. I'll add more when I remember more. Being poor sucked, and so did the Yugoslavian civil wars. In relation to the hyperinflation, my dad always says you get your paycheck, and by the time you arrived home it was worth half. Everything was homemade. Oatmeal is cheaper than cereal. Lots of beans and rice. No ack. Frick. I had blocked that crap out. Our parents wouldn't turn the account on in the middle of South TX summer. We had one, we just weren't allowed to use it. BC it was so expensive. Heat plus humidity, the sound of cicadas and a box fan, pointed to blow the air out of the house, was a lullaby each night. To this day I can't sleep well in the heat. I was so miserable. To top it off, we had super thick hair grown to our waist. BC little girls should have long hair and we weren't allowed to get it cut more than an inch every year or so by our mom, who mostly trimmed the dead ends. Frick, I still hate the heat here, but I definitely keep my account on even if it means I eat less meat and more cheap pasta options. Legit had a panic attack when I thought our air conditioner was broke once. So that was fun. Exactly this. We lived at the edge of town because you could get a little more property there. We had a huge garden and a small orchard, and what we didn't have room to grow we would buy from neighboring farmers. Summer break was tending the garden and working in the neighboring farms for petty cash or trade. Autumn was time for bottling all the fruits and veggies we grew, so we had enough to get through the winter. Half of our basement was for food storage. We had a lot of large bins with various grains. We dried all our own leaves for tea, mint, raspberry, and anything else my mom thought was good for you. We pressed our own apples cider. We always had a couple cows, pigs and few dozen chickens. But it never felt like we were poor until I got into my teens and realized how different we lived compared to many others in town. But we were never hungry or neglected, and we were never looked down on by our neighbors. I consider my youth a very enjoyable time of my life. As reference, this was in the US, 1970s and 80s. The first time I remember consciously realizing that we were poor was when I was 6 and went to the doctor because an eye infection had turned into sepsis. When asked who our family doctor was, and I had to reply the emergency room. The reason the question was asked was because the PA at the ER a week earlier had misdiagnosed it as pinky and sent us home saying everything would get better in a week or so. Actually, I had an infected cut on my cornea and it was spreading into my eye socket and bloodstream. The doctor was incredulous that nobody had even actually looked at the eye yet, as within half a second of using that eye light scope thingy doctors use to look in eyes and ears showed him what was wrong. I mean, I knew we didn't have much money a good while before that, but that was the first time I realized just how crippling poverty really is. That because my parents didn't have enough green paper slips in a bank, that I might lose my eye, and that the lack of those little green slips was going to have a long-term negative impact on my future. We were so poor that when we got sick or injured as kids, we were afraid to tell my dad, who would just blow up and make us cry since we couldn't afford it. One time when I was 7, my friend and I made a seesaw out of an old wood plank we found and used a tree stump for the base. Didn't know about the nail on the bottom, and when it teetered down on my side, that nail went right through my thumb. I didn't tell my parents for a couple of days until it got so infected and was oozing. My dad flipped out over the hospital bill, not that I was injured. Hiding any nice present you got from wealthier family members because people would tell about you having it if they ever saw you using food stamps. When I was 8 or 9, I got a really nice metal model airplane. It was expensive and really nice. Like a manufacturer's model. My uncle gave it to me. He had a friend in the aviation industry and got it from him. I was so proud of that airplane. Anyway, I made the mistake of bringing it outside to play with. A cop came cruising along and started quizzing me about it. He kept asking where I took it from, that he had report of a theft of an airplane like mine, that I need to tell him where I took it from. I broke down and started crying and actually handed it to him. My younger brother ran into the house and got my mom. She lit him up. I got my plane back, but my mom told me I couldn't take it outside anymore. After the way that cop treated me and made me feel, I never wanted to play with it again. To this day, if I have something nice, I don't tell anyone about it. Not eating out, except for birthdays. Fast food and takeout wasn't really a thing in my life until I moved out and had my own income. Everything was homemade. Pizza delivery was a big deal. Never buying name brand foods. You learn what off-brands taste the exact same and buy those when you're lucky enough to pick out some snacks. But literally all food was, and household products for that matter were off-brand. Finding ways to save money, whether it be buy coupons or buying school clothes from eBay and second-hand stores. Grew up in a tourist town and both parents worked for attractions. We got to do a lot of cool stuff, only because my parents would save the employee tickets they would get in paychecks and trade with other attractions and sites and stuff. I'm an adult now, and it's still hard for me to spend money on things I don't find absolutely necessary, even though I have the money to buy things I want. It's taught me to prioritize money and be grateful, and take good care of what I have. Powdered milk. NOAC. My parents sometimes skipped meals so us kids could eat. Clothes were hand-me-downs or from Walmart, and only for school starting. No wastefulness. Rarely eat out. No name brands. Antenna TV. No cable. No healthcare/health insurance. No dentist visits. I started working and buying my own clothes at age 14. Our home was falling apart around us. My dad tried to keep it together, sort of. Oh, and my parents never being home because they each worked multiple jobs. I could go on. We were homeless for 6 months. Luckily we had a camper to stay in at a campground, but we made do. There was a basketball court, a pond, and a lot of rich kids. Kinda made me feel like crap when these kids had like a second home that they go to a month out of the year, and I'm in a camper with my cokehead mom, alcoholic stepdad, and brother that's now on the run with 3 warrants. I guess I'm the only one that's somewhat normal. Lol. We never really had food either. Afterwards we moved into low-income housing and would lose power all the time cause they'd rather get fricked up than pay bills. I came home from school to see my TV, my PS2, games, gone. They pawned them to pay rent. I was working street the time, and I had to pay to get it back. I freaking hated it. I had a girlfriend, and would always go to her house. Basically came home to sleep and that's it. I'd try to stay out of the house as much as possible, and was super embarrassed when I'd have to tell her that I had no power, or food in the fridge, or a phone. But now, I work my butt off, my wife as well, and we get crap done. We're not rich, but we're comfortable, and we have the things we want, and are thankful for every bit, if it because she came up the same way. A single kerosene heater that would stink/smoke the whole house out on the few nights a year we could afford to run it, sleeping on the bathroom floor in summer because it was too dangerous to sleep on the balcony. Bologna and tomato sauce sandwiches 3 times a day, 1 pair of hand-me-down shoes that I was never allowed wear unless it was a special occasion. The only item in our house that used electricity was the clock radio in my parents' bedroom, and it only got turned on when they went to bed. Christmas consisted of receiving the clothes and school supplies for the next year. All your friends at school aren't hungry and share their lunch with you, and you never work out why. You discover chocolate milk and it literally blows your mind. McDonald's comes to town and 3 years later a friend's dad is driving a bunch of kids home from the game and asks you what you want, and you say nothing. Thanks, because you know better than to ask for anything, and because you have literally no idea what they actually sell there. Entire weekends spent wandering around town looking for coins, so that you can get 50c worth of mixed lollies, regular visits from the government. Lady who asks you a bunch of weird questions. Mum crying all the time. You get $10 from somewhere and it never even occurs to you to spend it. You give it to your parents. You never ever want for anything, because there is no point. Old mildewed towels. When I finally came into more money, it was such a foreign concept to actually replace towels more than once every 6 to 8 years. Same with bedding. It had never even crossed my mind that if your pillow starts getting gross you should replace it instead of just dealing with it. Watered down hand soap, shampoo, conditioner, glass cleaner, etc. Lots of dinners involving ingredients like ramen noodle packages. We had a very bland stir fry that just used a pound of ground beef, a pack of ramen, and frozen stir fry veggies with some seasonings. It was enough for the 4 of us. Campbell's soup was awesome. Most people hate how salty it is, but I grew up on that crap and still love it. Using things long after they had worn out. The thing that sticks out most to me is hair brushes. They could be missing half the bristles, but it didn't cross anyone's mind to replace it because it still barely performed its intended function. Toys were also used long after they wore out or broke. I suspect my siblings and I were also especially hard on toys. We were smart kids and often found creative and unconventional uses for toys when playing, but it was probably also because a lot of our toys came from thrift stores. The only reason we had a computer was because my mom's father gave us his old one free of charge. We were part of some technology test group and actually got to be early adopters of the internet and got web service in 1996. Without that test group though, IDK how long it would have been. We were watching and buying VHS tapes long after DVD became a thing. I think the last VHS we bought brand new was Madagascar, 2005. We had to really like a movie before my parents would buy it. We mostly just checked them out from the library, which meant not getting to watch new releases. Wearing clothes long after we had outgrown them was kinda standard for a few years when we didn't have the luxury of hand-me-downs from my older cousins. One day my mom was yelling about something money related and told me and my siblings that we were always dressed like little refugee children. I'm not sure if she was mad at us or the situation. I dress really nice, usually overdressed these days, and it is because of moments/comments like that. Not taking very long road trips at all because we didn't know if the car would break down or not. Or 3-hour trip was a huge deal. No video games or cable TV. I have gotten flack for this one from other people in similar situations saying they were dirt poor and still had cable. My parents just didn't see a need to spend money on cable when they were tight on money. It was PBS all day every day for us if we wanted TV. My kindergarten friends had Pokemon Red and Blue on their Game Boys. I was very sad that I couldn't have Pokemon. Christmas was a huge deal. My parents worked amazingly hard to get us cool stuff for Christmas, so it was kinda that one day we got a taste of more luxurious situation. On my second or third Christmas I got a shitton of Fisher-Price Little People playsets. Nowadays I'm making very good money in a comfortable job and I have all the tech and clothing I could want. I collect old video games as a sort of way to make up for lost time. My first ever video game was a cocktail table Space Raiders game at some arcade thing when my grandparents hosted a family reunion at a dude ranch. I was 5 and totally fell in love with the entire concept of video games. My parents felt bad about having to tell me I couldn't have a Gamma Boy or SNES/N64. It means so much that I now have the luxury of playing all the games I didn't get to enjoy as a kid. It makes me so happy in a way I can't really describe that I can finally make this dream come true for myself. Anyway, I sorta started rambling, but it's really cool to see how far I've come. Thanks op.